morning, the IRS finally released details for how they plan to spend $80 billion in funding over the next decade, which has concerned many lawmakers and economists. Joining us this morning is President of Americans for Tax Reform, Grover Norquist. Welcome back to the National Desk. Tell us, what does the IRS plan look like, and what does this mean for the average American taxpayer?
The Secretary of the Treasury told the IRS that they had 6 months to write down what are you going to do with the money over a 10-year period. Now, you would have thought that before you asked for and got $80 billion, you'd have a plan. But this is after they voted all the money, and they said 6 months, you'll give us an answer. That was more than 48 days ago. And they finally just put it out a couple of days ago, just before Easter, so no one would notice it. It doesn't answer any of the questions. It gives you about 2 years of budgets, not the 10 that the Secretary specifically said. They really are completely unclear on what they're going to do, other than massive new hiring of IRS agents. That's in the budget. That's clear that they're going to do it. But they haven't even leveled with the American people about what their plans are.
Massive new hiring of agents, meaning massive new audits, presumably in many of these cases, right? Democrats claim, though, this funding will not increase audits on Americans earning less than $400,000 a year. However, a preliminary assessment from the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office tells a whole different story, Grover. Their reports show at least $20 billion of revenue will have to come from lower and middle income families. So tell us more about this.
Well, and at exactly the time that the president was out there going, oh, we're only going to tax big businesses, which of course are taxes on workers and consumers. We're only tax big businesses and rich people. They were writing the instructions for the IRS about how to go after people who live on tips. Now, there are not a lot of Americans who work on tips who make $400,000 a year. So you can see that they're planning to go after lower and middle income Americans. They're writing this down. They're making it clear that if you get $600 through Venmo, you have to prove it wasn't income because the government will be told about it. Again, billionaires don't use Venmo. Normal people do, or all the various ways you can send money electronically. The government's now going to take all of your privacy, and then if you don't have the receipts for something you bought 20 years ago and then you sold in a garage sale, okay, they're going to tell you, well, that's income unless you can prove it's not. It's a massive violation of people's privacy, and it's going to be very expensive. And as you say, even the government admits it's tens of billions of dollars from lower-income Americans.
Meantime, the IRS also has expansion plans to fix and modernize the technology. But in the past 40 years, the IRS has received dozens of surges in funding with the promise of fixing technology and found little success. So how do we know we're going to see improvements this time around?
You won't. And we've seen this movie before. The IRS gets behind and they announce if we only had better computers. They get the billions of dollars for those computers, and then a few years later, same thing happens. This is again and again and again over the last 40 years. Their excuse has been the computers. It is not going to solve their problem because they're taking on massive new responsibilities, and they're bringing on a whole bunch of untrained people, and 53% of IRS agents don't go to work. They don't go to work. They stay at home, and they don't answer your phone from home when you try and call in. This is an agency that has violated people's privacy again and again. People have not been fired. They've been politicized. They wouldn't allow people back from the Tea Party for 3 years. Only one conservative group was allowed to incorporate, which is supposed to be pro forma, just, of course, 3 years politically saying, if we don't like your politics as a C3, C4, you won't be able to incorporate. You can't have a bank account. They destroyed the Tea Party movement that way. And now they're doing it in other areas as well. It's a significant problem.
The House GOP says it will withhold funding from the IRS to stop the increase of agents and what they say will be an abuse of power. Will this stop the agency, though, from hiring more agents? And how long can the GOP withhold this funding?
Well, if they get together and don't allow things to go into the budget, I think they can negotiate some of this down. You have enough votes in the Senate, Republican votes in the Senate, to filibuster a budget that would give the IRS more money. There is not a single reform in this $80 billion package, no reform to protect your privacy, no reform to get more people to answer phones and actually do so competently. It's all more enforcement. I'm sorry, there's $3 billion supposedly for services. we'll see. They haven't done very well with that so far.
All right, Grover Norquist, we appreciate you joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Have a great week.